So.
Oh, now it's just my face.
Yeah.
All right.
And Adam's just going to loom behind you.
I'm just, yeah.
Forgot to get
Take your chair and slide that way.
Did we start? Yeah.
All right, so welcome to Colasec for May 2022. Woohoo! Every single time we get to Colasec, I am baffled by how much time has passed. Where are the slides? Who's doing the slides? How does this work? Is this
Tim? Can you?
Yeah, just hold on.
okay?
I apparently had to open up Google.
Yeah, so slides will be up there.
As soon as my permissions catch up. I'll be right back.
We are professionals. We have been doing this for 6 years now.
It's been way more than 6 years. Hasn't?
Has it?
That was 2013. 2014?
Oh, no.
COVID doesn't count.
Yes. Well, we persist.
2014. It's not a decade yet.
Okay.
Don't do that.
Isn't that 8 years?
It's 8 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you just get so used to saying 6, you know.
Picks up the
Jesus.
It's like the 90s,
Like
5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time stopped when COVID started.
There's no- it says
I have a 1-year-old somehow. I don't know how that happened.
You could fix it in post if people videos it.
There's this thing called the birds and the bees.
I knew you were gonna go there.
Apparently your parents didn't have that.
Stream looks good. Did y'all need me to? Okay.
Hey, there's the slides. All right. Want to move into the next one? Since we've already talked about the fact that it's May. Hey, there we are.
I feel strange.
I'm
sitting
Adam.
next to you.
Been here since the beginning, along with that guy that's sharing the slides, Mr. Tim DeBlock. Jessica is fashionably late. She is supposed to be here 5 minutes ago now. So there's that. Mr. Jeff Lang is with us on the ones and twos.
Howdy.
And Corey and David have been working very hard to get our. There she is. Working very hard to get our AV setup working. So, welcome to Colasec.
Thanks.
Moving on.
He's an official visitor.
Clicky.
Wow.
I think Tim is trolling me. There is Mr. Box on the table. We just decreed before the meeting started that if you manage to unlock, any of the locks, we've got a whole bunch of stickers, and you have to take one of the stickers home. It's your punishment for picking a lock. There's also some other swag in there, and we've got some swag in the bag if you want to go through any of that. It's been sitting in a box for 2 years because of COVID, so please feel free to take it.
Not because it had COVID.
Yay, COVID. So if you have not gotten connected with us and would like to, we are on Slack. We've got the Google Forums / email list. We've got a Twitter account that we don't use. You can email us. We might check it. And you can get with us on LinkedIn. We're actually pretty reliably on there. And that's our YouTube stream. If you're somehow watching this stream and don't have that link, that's amazing. Excellent work. Please email one of us.
How's that going to help?
I just want to know how to get it.
No, tweet us.
Yeah, tweet at us. That's a good plan. Tweet at us. If you would like to participate in sharing what you are imbibing tonight, I'm having a little something from Lagunitas. You can share it on our Slack channel. We're pretty active about that as well. You can also troll and heckle people. Beware, you may get burned down. It happens. Mr. mental health hackers. So the last couple of years have been very hard. It has been both with happenings in the world and just being isolated from one another, not being able to do this, be in person and hang out. It's harder than it ever has been. Mental health is an important thing to keep an eye on. It's to pay attention to and to work at. I've been seeing a therapist now for about a year and a half, and it's one of the best health decisions I've ever made. So yeah, if you are in need of assistance, feel free to reach out to any of us organizers, and any of these resources, they're online. The Mental Health Hackers crew is happy to reach out and lend a helping hand where it's needed.
And also, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so
Did not know that. Good call out.
doubly important.
Okay, so upcoming events. This slide has been missing in action for like 2 years because there were no upcoming events that we were aware of. We will get into the things that have solid dates here in a minute. I want to talk for a second about the Colalog. So they are apparently meeting regularly, 100% virtually. There's some issue with the link. We weren't comfortable throwing that on the slides today. If you are interested in attending a Colalog meeting, they're typically very interesting and topical. Reach out to one of the organizers either on Slack or LinkedIn or email, and we'll get you the link to their regular meetups. I reached out about Palmetto Cyber Pros. They are not currently meeting, but they plan to start meeting again in July. We have plans for our meeting in July that we haven't talked to them about yet, so we may do some sort of collaboration between the two groups. And the ISC Squared Midlands chapter, as far as I know, they are still meeting. They've got something on their website or LinkedIn, I can't remember where I saw it, about meeting again in July. They are doing 3 or 4 times a year, so they're not quite as regular as we are. But as soon as we have more information about those meetings, those will be updated on this slide for next time around. And it's suddenly occurring to me, why have we never put this data on the website?
Changes too much.
It's a lot of pain in the ass to change. Yeah, fair enough.
We
So
don't do
nix
good
that
at
idea.
stuff.
It's not happening. Jeff, do you want to talk about the other 2 events? Didn't you post those?
Yeah, sure. So SANS is hosting a free ransomware summit on June 16th. I'm actually giving a presentation on that about the Kaseya ransomware attack that we had last year. No? Yes. Last year, 2021.
Time has no meaning.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. But it is a free event, and it's remote and virtual, so if you are interested at all in trends in ransomware, check it out. We also have Open Source South Carolina. Their next meeting is May 25th. It is at SoCo. Is that still the co-work place that's down in the Vista, I think?
Yeah, I think so.
So they would like RSVPs, so you can go to the meetup link that's there and RSVP for them. They did post that they're having a happy hour before the May 25th, so if you want some free beer, I think you can show up. You can get some free beer. So.
Good stuff. In the news. Hey, some ransomware things happened. Oh, we didn't put the name of the college on there, so now I'm gonna blank on it because it's not right.
Lincoln College.
Lincoln College.
So Lincoln College, due to some financial difficulties brought on by the pandemic and a ransomware attack, has had to completely shut down operations, as in they will not be reopening their doors ever. They've been around for, what, 175 years?
115, I think it was. Yeah,
It
that's
was
the one I
115.
said.
It was a
157 years.
Okay, well, I have the numbers right, it just stopped right over.
Sorry.
Lincoln
but-
College?
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard about that too. That's insane.
Yeah, and Costa Rica has declared a state of emergency over a ransomware attack that shut down their government. So yeah, some major ransomware attacks going on there.
Some wild picture.
Yeah, Tim found that and I thought it was hysterical. So due to a boneheaded piracy it was lawsuit, right, Jeff?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Due to a boneheaded piracy, a boneheaded ruling in relation to a piracy lawsuit, every ISP in the U.S. has to block these 3 piracy sites, and they're not entirely clear about how. They just say you have to block access to these 3 sites.
They listed 96 ISPs and then followed it up with, and anybody else who's not on this list.
So you want the URLs, Adam? It's Israel.tv, Israel-tv.com, and SDAROT.tv.
Sabara?
Sadarot?
Not affected.
It's like carrot with a D.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. They say it's these 3 sites, but they actually broadcast over something like 100 different domains that are all listed in the appendix of the court ruling. And again, they also say, and anywhere else they might do so in the future.
Yeah, so
Wow.
as the network engineer in me is going, you guys have no idea what the hell the internet is, do you?
We're gonna have to do machine learning on those domains.
Right, like there's no way to actually practically do this, and even if you did, you're gonna break so much of the internet that
Build a great wall. Just like China's great wall.
Right.
Firewall.
Like, guys, that's not how the internet works, especially not in the U.S. So good luck.
So we're
with that.
walking Tor now.
Right. So Google has a new thing you can do where you can sign up to have your address, phone number, and something else removed from Google searches. It's a voluntary thing. Like, I don't want to be doxxed to take my information down off of Google searches. So if that was a Krebs article, I believe. So if you are interested in participating in that removal of your information from the internet, go and look that up. It's one of the top 3 or 4 articles on his site right now. Next. So GitHub is now forcing multi-factor authentication. If this hasn't happened yet, it's happening in the very near future. We talked about this a 3 months ago. They're not forcing it for all authentication, but if you contribute code on GitHub, you're going to be required to sign up for some form of 2FA. So
Finally.
For those of you covered by the OCC or FFIEC, the regulators are apparently getting hot and heavy on MFA this year as well. Just as a heads up.
multi-factor all the things. Jeff, did you want to take this, or do you want me to?
Either way.
So, this is more of a skateboarding dog silliness article than anything else, but apparently there is some evidence that threat actors have begun downloading data that is encrypted with the intent of just storing it and hanging on to it until such time as they've got quantum computing that will be able to break the encryption without having to know the secrets. I just find this kind of hilarious because quantum computing was going to be the thing that I was going to be having to study when I was in high school. I haven't studied it yet.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
There was a talk at Black Hat like 3 years ago on the same exact thing about threat actors stealing data to decrypt later.
Yeah.
It still hasn't happened.
This was in my brain. I feel like we discussed it at some point too.
Well,
Yeah,
there
we
is
probably
a
did.
functioning 12-bit quantum computer. So if your password is a character
12
and a half,
whole bits.
then you're done.
We're doomed.
You're done.
Well, I've heard all kinds of stuff like that you know, that what was it? Weren't people saying that by the end of the 2010s
Yeah,
we'd have
it's-
quantum computing, and then also by the end of the 2010s we'd all.
Where are my flying cars? Where are my my fusion reactors?
Well, but what about even semi-automatic vehicles? I mean, we have some of that, but not nearly as much as we thought we would. You know.
Nope. There we go. Yes. That's an evergreen XKCD.
Yep. That's one of my favorite.
Anything else? Any other news articles, happenings that you'd like to discuss? We felt like it was
So
a really.
I was going to say Google, Apple, and Microsoft are going to support FIDO, so you can log in with your device via some sort of swipe pattern. And
Where was this yesterday while we were putting these slides together?
I decided to save it for other news. Leave me alone.
We were also for the first time this morning, so
there were also a few drinks while we were putting these together last night. So.
Do you think it'll actually be like open source? Are they gonna like come together and actually do anything, or is it gonna be like each person doing a proprietary bullshit? Each company.
No, I mean, the FIDO Alliance is what they're going to go on. So to me, that's
Okay.
the body that they're going to look for the standard, right? So I think YubiKey already follows that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, and I think those three big tech companies are smart enough to realize that they can't have their own proprietary thing, like USB or device ports.
I mean, they can.
Right.
They've gotten away with it for
Thank you for
decades.
reminding me everything I hate about this industry.
Yeah, yeah. So I think FIDO. I mean, you have to at this point, right? Because that would just get messy.
And Jessica's
that
taking
would
all of the ranch.
Right. Well, and it, if you're using your Apple device to log in,
Wow.
I love you, Jessica.
Adam is now monitoring cul-de-sac members' ranch usage.
That's an interesting
It's a bit of data these
All
collected,
right,
like
so
Google.
any other news items or happenings that you'd like to discuss?
Well, I want to say that I think the privacy thing will stick for the ISPs.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see it.
Say
Because-
what?
Well, ISPs are not federally monitored as critical infrastructure.
Correct.
They're not
They've-
and that is a ruling only out of New York.
They've been working for decades to make sure that they're not regulated as.
No, they've only been working for like several years because they were under net neutrality, but the net neutrality
Yeah, I know,
got
but
expanded.
they have been working for decades to make sure they're not regulated.
Oh
like
yeah, they're not.
utilities.
They're not going to be. So,
Yeah.
but it's interesting because I just read the federal order or the state order because it was a New York state judge that issued this ruling.
it was a
Well,
federal judge, I thought.
No, it says in New York.
It's probably the federal circuit in New York.
Right, but
Yeah.
it's not like Supreme Court level.
Yeah,
So-
right. Yeah.
Yet.
It's got a few
It
more
was-
districts to climb before it gets there.
Right, but it says
The circuits, rather.
It says ISPs must block it by any means or any means possible.
Yeah, right.
So the ISP goes, it's not possible. Meh.
So the big interesting thing there is that it was a default ruling, so they were Israeli actors, and so of course they didn't show up to a U.S. court to defend themselves because why would you? So in effect, whatever was in the documents just was a default ruling. So someone is most likely going to come by and challenge it based on just the ridiculousness of it,
Yeah.
even though they're not related to those
You mean the
factors.
ISPs aren't going to challenge?
Do you think that's an EFF cause to pick up, or it wouldn't surprise me. Anyway.
I think it's super interesting because there's just so much about internet service providers that aren't regulated. It's not regulated.
Mm-hmm.
And then so you go back and you look, but who in this room does not treat their ISP like it's a utility?
I mean, yeah. I've got two options. That's about
They're
it.
more like a threat actor.
They are more like a threat actor, really.
But
If you're not using your router to like create multiple access points and steal internet for like 3 to 4 homes, then like gotta hide it behind a firewall so they don't know though.
Right.
But I mean, it's
Natting is a wonderful thing.
It's interesting because when you go back and you look at the federal grants, they're releasing federally sourced money in order to fund people building more infrastructure.
Yeah, they gave them like 7 different times. They gave them like $500
Yeah.
million. They didn't do anything with it.
I was
So
gonna say that this.
that's a
there's
hill to die on.
There was a new a new round of we're gonna fund high-speed internet for the entire country. Yeah, like the last
And
six
then,
fucking times.
and then we lobbied them to lower the definition of high-speed internet to 10 megabits.
Well, it's just interesting
Anyway,
because it's
we're not salty at all.
Has anybody noticed like T-Mobile 5G home internet has been getting pushed out everywhere now because they're getting those grants?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Or I haven't noticed it. Is it any good? Have you used it?
It's not bad. I have it at home. It's like 350 something megabit and down and maybe 100 up, but
That's not terrible.
There's a
Did
I also live like in the middle of town too.
Is the
so-
latency okay?
Right.
It's like 14 milliseconds. It's not terrible.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Well, Starlink's becoming
Where I'm
fast
at, I
too.
mean, if you're in rural, it might be worse.
There's a
Yeah,
Georgia
yeah.
power company, right? A Georgian power company that's actually split off into 2 branches so that it can take advantage of funding to build, like, they're actually laying fiber.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then in the mountains of North Carolina, they're laying fiber.
the
MCEC.
MCEC, which you know what
Well,
annoys me.
It's MCEC and their Spartanburg group is doing it too.
So MCEC is running fiber to along their power line. So everybody, one of their customers now has fiber internet as an option. I can throw a rock from my front door and hit the street that their MCEC service is on. I'm getting mine from SE&G. So you know what I don't get?
No fiber.
I got a fusion splicer, we can fix that.
Anyway.
My mother-in-law lives in the middle of nowhere. And we just ran Carolina Connect. to her.
Tim is
That's
reminding us that we are way off
Yeah.
topic and way over time,
See
so
if we
we're
can get
going
a
to wrap
gig
this
in.
up and move on into our presentation for the evening. I'm going to go get it. Oh, are we skipping? We're skipping the cool. We ran over time. Sorry.
All right, so Gus comes to us from one of our favorite sponsors, Checkpoint, and I absolutely love Tim. You've got some competition here because his CFP is bar none the best I've ever read. It's way better than the T Swift lyrics that you posted last time. Oh, don't skip past. Okay. So Gus is going to talk to us about cloud security, and he's going to give us some really poignant topic points about how maybe we should use a more draconian approach to security. So it should be really entertaining. So we're going to take 5-ish minutes, grab a beverage, some more food, whatever, and we'll get into it.
I'm now reading the CFP.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Alright, we'll do intermission. are back. We've got Gus from Checkpoint is going to talk to us about draconian cloud security. So take it away, Gus.
Hey, thank you. Again, my name is Gus Coronel. I've been with Checkpoint for about 18 years, give or take, maybe a little bit more. Usually when I give a presentation, it's always a guess. I sometimes give them too basic for the audience. Sometimes I give them too complex for the audience. My last presentation was an hour talking about BGP deployments in Azure, and half the people were glazed-eyed. Today I'm going to talk about most of the basic cloud security stuff, but I can go deeper, and I love it when people ask questions if I'm doing a presentation. So don't necessarily feel that you have to wait in order to to ask about anything. So hopefully I have the right mix, and we'll find out. So let me go ahead and share my screen.
Oh yeah, we love to interrupt and ask all kinds of silly questions and have fun
Awesome.
with presentations. So yeah.
Then we're gonna get along just great. I am not going to run the full slideshow. I'm just gonna basically let it the way that it is right now. So I'm going to be talking about cloud security, and whenever I start talking about cloud, or whenever my company starts talking about cloud security, the very first thing that we talk about is CNAPP, which is Gartner's Cloud Security Vision. I normally don't talk about this piece. It's usually the account managers come in. And by the way, nothing that I'm going to be talking about today is actually Checkpoint specific. There are tons of vendors out there that support CNAPP in some form. And usually the account managers that are part of the presentation, usually they love to basically start with the CNAPP slides. And the CNAPP slides basically just go through what is CNAPP, what's CWPP, CIM, CSPM, and the slides look like something like this, and that's me right there in the center, because there's not a lot of interesting or engaging things that you can go by when you just start reciting different things that you need to take into consideration when you're thinking about securing cloud, right? But
I think there's bingo just on this one slide alone.
Well, there you go. So one of the things that I did notice, however, is that almost everything that has to do with CNAPP and cloud security can be mapped to a fascist police state. And I thought that that would be an awesome way to map security, because you may not always remember, oh, wait a minute, there's 18 different things that I need to be aware of when I'm trying to secure the cloud, because they're, I'm trying to reduce my attack surface. I'm trying to basically minimize the type of ways that I can be hit or surprised. And I cannot always remember all of them, right? So I basically listed equivalents for every single thing that we're going to be talking about regarding cloud security. And I just pretty much mapped it to what a security or fascist state would do, because it makes incredible sense. These are people that are abusing power in order to stay safe, in order to stay in power. An IT cloud administrator, a security administrator for cloud, it's a little bit like that. We're trying to flex our muscles, make sure that we are control or have a grasp or control of what's going on in the cloud in order to keep it secure. And the nice thing about cloud is it's really not very easy to commit genocide in the cloud. And when you're destroying something, usually destroying bits and bytes, not the real people. So I'm going to go real quickly to the list. And you can see almost everything in the list maps to something that we want to or recommend that you deploy. But we're going to be talking about stopping and asking for papers, and taking people's mobile phones and checking whatever is inside of them. We're going to be talking about, if you're stopping somebody, strip searching them is always the better solution. We're going to be talking about encrypting our own communications and securing them, but at the same time monitoring what anybody else is talking about. We're going to be talking about controlling the infrastructure. Basically, nobody can build anything without our say-so, our permits, and our inspections. We're going to be talking about asking about everything, not just settling for whatever some program or some person is telling us it's happening. Talking about keeping an eye on everything, basically laying down the law, or making sure that everybody knows what is it that everybody needs to conform to, and make sure that we have enough enforcement 24/7 to make sure that that law is not violated. But then we're going to make it very easy for ourselves to change that law. So the law really applies to anybody that's living in the environment. But if you're a security person, you need to be able to modify, add, delete anything that you're looking for, in order to make sure that everything is covered. We're going to be talking about overseeing our own enforcers and anybody that has access to any critical system or just resides near anything that could be a critical system. We're going to be talking about fixing everything automatically, because that is the best way to fix it the moment that it is discovered, and sort of reducing that window of vulnerability. We're going to be talking about the best way to spy on everything and everyone in the cloud. We're going to be talking about how to get notified and alerted right away. Always securing, inspecting, and controlling new technologies. Not limiting ourselves to the network, but going inside of everybody's house. So not just public places, but going in and seeing what's happening inside of the containers, VMs, pretty much everything. Talking about record and analyzing every single conversation, which is basically just flows and traffic going back and forth. Recording and analyzing every activity, basically anybody that's doing anything in the cloud, what they're doing and why they're doing it. We're going to talk about censorship. No one writes a single period or anything that is not read by our censorship board. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about risk analysis and how to, when we get the list of people that are violating our rules or doing something fishy, or us trying to figure out what's going on, how to rank all these things to make sure that we address the first ones first. So pretty much everything that I've mentioned here maps to a CNAP, a Gartner requirement, which is, again, what the recommendations of what to do to secure cloud. And we can deploy specific tools to do all this. Again, all these tools that you see on the right-hand side, or capabilities or features or functionality, are not Checkpoint specific. I am, of course, biased. I think that our tools do all these things better than somebody else's. Some products do some of these things. We do a little bit of everything. In some cases, we do a lot of what's in a particular spot. But again, just because I mentioned something doesn't mean that it's a Checkpoint specific. And there's a lot of NVAs, a lot of security providers out there that will have something similar, but maybe not as cool or not as nice. Okay.
Can I share that?
Yes.
I'm currently in a SANS class about cloud security, and I want to share that in the morning if I can.
I'm going to give you copies of the slides. There's nothing proprietary in here, and again, this is actually built to help explain cloud security, or basically a lot of people, when they think of cloud security, they think of maybe 5, maybe 10 things, but they don't realize that there's a lot more that they should be able to control, or they should control. So yes, I'm going to upload the presentation. Feel free to use anything in any of the slides, or ask me again any questions.
Thank you.
Hey, not a problem. Okay, so we start at the beginning. Show us your papers, which is basically just stop and frisk, just regular segmentation and access control, dividing cloud into multiple parts, putting checkpoints or inspection points in between, so nothing moves in and out of the cloud, or sideways inside of the cloud, or goes out of the cloud without having to go through some sort of inspection point. And access control is always the first thing. You can do access control with the free cloud utilities. Every single cloud provider, of course, has some sort of a filter, access security group, network security group. So access control is the easiest thing. But as you remember the first slide, stopping and frisking is great, but going deep and strip searching is the best way to go. So nothing really beats your X-ray scans and strip searches, which translate to deep packet inspections and looking for threats on the actual packet payloads. Um, and I like to sort of mention then what is the big difference between what the clouds themselves give you as tools to secure and the type of security that you can get with a third party, regardless of who that third party is. Um, there's the cloud providers have a lot of really good tools actually, and I have an example here for AWS tools. Azure has even a little more than this, and I sometimes show the Azure toolkit. Um, but this is always a good start. But most of the things that you see here are going to be just plain access control. There's going to be a little bit of deep packet inspection, usually as a WAF. So okay, you can deep inspect HTTP. There's a little bit of IDS IPS as well, so that's always kind of good and neat. I like the fact that AWS also has or gives you a little bit of DLP capability. But the moment that you put some sort of third-party next generation firewall inspection thing in the cloud, your security capabilities look more like this. And I'm not going to go through everything in this list. Remember, you're going to get the slides, but I'm just going to do very quick some highlights. You can do payload analysis and malware detection and prevention, which security groups just or even IPS cannot do. You can do full 0-day and file scrubbing. Again, that's way beyond what an IPS can do. You can get really creative using tags as part of your policy, and use tags from multiple cloud vendors. Everything that is tagged as a database can talk to anything that is tagged as an application server in one cloud or the other. I sometimes say, if you are in AWS and you're in Azure and you're in Google and you have application servers there and your databases are residing on-prem, on your data center, on maybe VMware, you can have a rule that says anything that is tagged as a database server in all three clouds can talk to something that is tagged as an application or a server or a web server on NSX or on VMware, even the vCenter. So the capabilities to use tagged objects in the cloud or on-prem are also a really nice addition that is not always available on the regular tools. Geolocation enforcing, detecting tunnel traffic, access control again on third-party feeds. All those are things that are very, very basic. And most cloud providers, actually none of them, do most of the things that are here. They're just beginning to touch what the requirements are. So most of the people that come to us because they're hitting some sort of a limit. They want to do something else that the cloud provider doesn't do. They've been playing maybe with the Azure Enterprise Firewall. They've been playing with the AWS Managed Firewall System, and they just hit a wall. So it's always a good idea to consider that third-party NVA and be one of the first things you deploy up there, because again, it's going to be able to give you a ton of nice capabilities beyond what the cloud provider gives you. The second piece, and if you remember on the first slide, encrypt and protect your own communications while inspecting everybody else's. APIs is the way that you usually give instructions and directions in the cloud, whether it's deploying systems or servers or creating new VNets or peering systems or adding internet gateways, changing the number of interfaces on your servers, tagging things, changing routes. All that is usually done via some sort of an API. If your cloud is talking back or you want to have a conversation between multiple systems and the cloud, APIs are the way to go. So of course, APIs have to be protected. They have to be secured. They are normally already encrypted, but you do not always have the capability to protect API traffic everywhere. AWS has a great API gateway, of course, but sometimes your traffic may not go through an API gateway because it's not internal, it's not external at all. And the AWS API gateway has a public IP. Basically, anything has to go through there to be protected. Maybe you want to protect API traffic inside. So those tools to protect API traffic are, in my opinion, extremely important when you're doing things in the cloud. Because if somebody fakes your API calls or breaks your API calls or hijacks your API capabilities, they can pretty much do a lot of damage. So again, protecting APIs is one of the things that is really, really important. Um, I also like to talk about, since we're inspecting packets, we're in the stop and look phase. I want to talk about next generation WAFs. When you deploy something in the cloud, you have AWS has a WAF, Azure has a WAF. There are better WAF solutions than that. And again, it's not just a checkpoint, but the nice thing about the latest generation WAFs is that, number one, you can deploy them anywhere. You can deploy them as sidecars inside of a container. You can deploy them as plugins on an ingress controller. You can deploy them on their own a VM as edge devices, maybe in load balance scenarios. But the wonderful thing is that they're no longer necessarily using signatures. And one of the greatest examples that I loved when Log4j came out, we were looking at some of the people deploying our next generation WAFs, and they were stopping Log4j weeks before it was officially named. Oops. Sorry. My microphone got excited and just fell. It's back up. Okay. We didn't even know what the name of the attack was, but when we looked at some of our customers, we saw that the next generation WAF had stopped all the attempts, mostly because it's using multiple decision factors when to analyze and make sure that something is an attack. It's not just a signature. It's how the traffic is moving, whether it's something that looks human or looks like it's a bot, actually understands what some of the requests may be. It's not just a pattern. It understands what the underlying data is, what the behavior of a regular site happens to be. So it gives you an advantage when you don't have to worry about writing signatures or downloading signatures that, okay, in some cases may take just 4 hours to come out after something has been found out and named. But what about those 2 months or year before anybody even realizes that there's something out there that is attacking your systems? Having that extra layer of WAF protection is actually highly recommended.
I have a quick question.
Yes, by all means.
So, if you're talking about it being blocked prior to that happening, do in your case Checkpoint, but other vendors that are doing these, do you roll those do you look at those kind of blocks and roll those into maybe undocumented vulnerabilities?
That is a great question. So we're not necessarily monitoring all our customer logs all the time. Some customers get a managed service from us, and when they do that, their logs are sort of forwarded to our incident response team, and then we can look and analyze things that are going on. And in some cases, we have discovered brand new attacks, brand new vulnerabilities, just by looking at the actual traffic and logs from customers that use us as part of their incidents control. I cannot claim that we discovered Log4j. In this particular case, we did not. We just realized that we were stopping Log4j when we went back because, again, customers that had our service were saying, okay, I want to make sure that I haven't been hit. I want to make sure that, nobody has come in exploiting some of these vulnerabilities. And we have noticed that the attack patterns that were unrecognizable before were now very neatly falling into that Log4j category, and they had been stopped because of the multi-level decision of some of our systems. So again, just to let you know, there are better or more interesting WAF solutions out there than just the regular signature ones. I know of at least two other companies in addition to us that do something like this. So it's just something to think about. Um, Next, controlling the infrastructure. The nice thing about the cloud, or the interesting thing about the cloud, is that not only can you attack things through packets, through the actual traffic moving through the networks, you can actually change the architecture. You can change the infrastructure of the cloud itself. It's like somebody can come in and just put a window on your data center, or turn off the air conditioner, or add cards to one of the servers in your racks. So once you know that a control layer it also needs to be protected, um, there is it's sort of like an eye-opening moment. And normally when I'm talking about controlling systems using firewalls, and I say, well, you have a firewall in the cloud, you need to make sure that the traffic goes through the firewall, and you do that using routing tables. So you're basically funneling traffic through these systems because you're routing through service endpoints, or you're routing through load balancers that or interfaces that lead to our systems, right? And then the question is, what happens if somebody changes the routing table? And if we have, 300 routing tables, and somebody changes one destination in one routing table, so that destination is no longer pointing at a firewall, how do we know about it? Again, we need to control the infrastructure. We need something that is looking at all these cloud settings, cloud devices, and make sure, yes, that somebody's not deploying something in Brazil that is mining crypto, but something that is not always something that you will think about. Like, if you're making policies and basing the policies on tags, well, what if somebody starts tagging things the way that they shouldn't? So that's the type of control that you need to have. Not only do you need to make sure that people are not deploying servers in places that you don't know anything about, or people that are putting public IP addresses on machines that shouldn't have. And the cloud policy controls are usually very good at preventing things like that. Control Tower, for example, or Azure policies are really good at things like that. But that's just the beginning. Again, you want to do things like, I want to put a taxonomy tag on every single object that tells me what the accounting code, what the project is, what the division this belongs to, what the administrator that is in charge of this is. And I want to make sure that that tag is not missing, but is formatted correctly using digits that are part of my database of codes. And then I want to run reports against that. That is beyond what something like Azure Policies or Control Tower can do, but it is beyond the capabilities, or is within the capabilities of a good posture management system, a good CSPM system. So you really want to be able to control the infrastructure of the cloud to that degree, to that level.
If someone comes in and
Yes.
installs a window in my data center, I'm giving them a job.
Well, if they can do it without you noticing, that would be the logical reaction. Yes.
So
They,
if
they,
they hack in and patch all of our systems, then great. We haven't been able to get to that in months.
yeah. But the big problem that you have in the cloud is that somebody can open a window for 5 minutes, a Saturday at 2 a.m., someplace that you cannot see, and then just put everything back the way that it was, and they are gone, right? So you really need something that is looking at thousands of objects, or tens of thousands of objects, hundreds of accounts, or thousands of accounts, in some cases millions of cloud objects, depending on the size of the enterprise, and making sure that everything everywhere is being monitored 7 by 24. So there's really no way to do this unless you do some sort of automation. And again, the cloud providers give you a little bit of this power. They usually do it at creation. So when you're trying to create something that is violating the policies, they sort of stop you. But you actually need, in some cases, way more control than that, and a lot more visibility than that. Which leads me to, don't rely on what a system is showing you. You need a capability of changing that system so you can ask things of it and have it show you what you really want to see. So a lot of CSPM posture management products out there have dashboards. Um, Most of them have dashboards that you cannot control. You really want a system that has dashboards that you can configure, and they look one way if you're interested in security events. They look another way if you're interested in compliance events. They look another way if you're looking for misconfigurations. So depending on what your job is in maintaining, administering, or securing the cloud, you need to have visibility that makes sense to you. So being able to pretty much build your own visibility into the cloud that's showing you the things that are important to you is something that I particularly think is very, very important, and is something that you should demand out of whatever vendor is supplying this visibility into the cloud for you. Of course, you need to be able to inventory things. You need to be able to know what's being created, when it was created, when it was changed, when it was added. So some sort of visibility into the inventory is necessary. And thankfully, this is something that pretty much almost everybody does. But once you turn in, sorry, a question there?
No, we just like your slide.
Oh, okay. You like 8209? Well, okay. So, it, whenever you get a posture management solution, it's going to come with some sort of built-in assessments. Some of those assessments are going to be usually regulations. Whether it's NIST, FedRAMP if you're trying to do business with the government, High Trust if you're a hospital, state regulations, federal regulations, industry regulations. So there's a lot of regulations that are going to be part of the system. But again, you want to go beyond that, because yes, I need to be GDPR compliant because I'm doing business with the European Union. But you also need to have some sort of a rule that says if somebody leaves a system running for 48 hours straight in a lab, I'm going to kill that system, or I'm going to shut it down. Or I'm going to shut down everything in every lab after 6 p.m. Eastern time, because nobody should be, doing any lab work after that. Or we're talking about that taxonomy tag, making sure that everything is done exactly the way that you want and labeled exactly the way that you want. And then making sure that you're not only looking for all those things, that you are continuously looking for those violations. Continuously making sure that whatever credentials are being shown are the right credentials, the systems are being tagged the right way. Once a system is tagged in a particular way, it's behaving like every system that is tagged that way should behave. All those things, again, should be taken care of. And you need to ask, well, how often are we checking? Are we checking every 5 minutes? Are we checking every 15 minutes? Are we checking every hour? Are we checking whenever there's an alarm that gets triggered that we put up? So those are usually the right questions to ask. And yes, of course, everything that you set up should be able to be automated. It's great if you press a big red button that says "Make to run the assessment right now." It's even better if you say, "These are the list of assessments that I want to run against my cloud. I want to run them continuously, and you just give me a ring whenever you see something that is out of whack." So changing the laws that you don't like. A lot of assessments are going to be coming in with your system, whether you're SOC 2 compliant, whether you're HIPAA compliant, whether you're GDPR compliant. But sometimes, or most of the time, I would say, you're going to want to add things to those assessments. You want to change those assessments. Maybe not everything in our cloud needs to be HIPAA compliant. Maybe just certain VPCs, certain VNets, certain regions need to be HIPAA compliant. Maybe every CIDR block that's has a 10 on the second octet needs to be HIPAA compliant, but nothing else needs to be. So you can, or you should be able to very quickly change whatever the rule is, whatever it is that you're looking for inside of the cloud, to make it conform to what your specific cloud looks like. So that flexibility of changing that instruction again is key. And there are some systems that say like, hey, we check for GDPR. Here are the 80 things that we check, but they don't let you change that. Well, that's no good. I mean, it's great that I'm checking for those 80 things, but I want to be able to maybe modify how I'm checking for those things because my cloud is set up in a particular way that's interesting. Or I want to check for a lot of things way beyond what GDPR says is required, because there are things that are important to me specifically and to my cloud in particular.
So question on
Yes.
that, kind of the bottom
Uh-huh.
of that slide. What
Uh-huh.
makes a rule or a policy that you would set up zero trust? What's an example?
Thank you for reading that, because I put that there to remind myself to talk about zero trust, and I totally forgot about it. Okay, I get asked about zero trust a lot, which is awesome because it is something that everybody should use as a mantra, right? But a lot of people think that zero trust is a particular product or zero trust is a particular solution, and the reality is zero trust is I want to say a state of mind, but it's more an approach. To me, zero trust means I'm going to build a system where I do not trust anybody or any object. I don't care if it's a secretary or the CEO. I don't care if it's the CISO or the CISO's son that may be visiting and sitting by the snack bar. Everybody is treated as they're a potential threat to my system. And you can configure security systems to behave that way, so that to me, there used to be a whole, and still, there are firewall companies, for example, that have the idea of trusted and untrusted zones. I do not believe in a trusted zone at all. To me, whether there's something internal or something external, in both cases, it can be the source of an attack. I do not know what is inside of my network or inside of a trusted zone that can do me harm. Um, I saw an incredible presentation about internal threats by um, the the security director of a really big corporation. I want to say Intel, but I won't name names. Um, and they had done an amazing amount of work to try to detect when an employee could go bad. Um, that is, they were keeping or tracking in an anonymized way, of course, factors about their employees that could make them a risk. Whether that had been going through a divorce, fighting with their supervisors. It was the most amazing system that I ever saw. But what came to my mind is you don't have to go through all that. Just assume that every single employee can be insane already or go completely wacko tomorrow. And yes, and I've seen this. I've actually was in a company where somebody was fired, and on the way out, they basically they grab a sledgehammer or some sort of a blunt object and went to town on the data center because they had not, they forgot to take his access or badge away, right? Or maybe I think he just borrowed it from somebody else's or grabbed it because they knew where they kept it and went into the system and started to go all postal on a bunch of equipment. So you never really know, but if you plan and you build your security knowing that anybody can be a threat and everybody has to be treated the same way as a potential threat, then you have zero trust. And that goes to objects as well. So uh, microsegmentation is usually one of the biggest components of zero trust, because you're saying, I am not checking for things subnet to subnet or VPC to VPC. I'm checking them either VM to VM, or I'm checking for containers inside of the VM and making sure that one container is not talking to another container inside of that same host that they should not be talking to. So bringing that boundary down to the minimum place, and then making sure that everything that is outside of that boundary is a threat. whether it belongs to the company or whether it doesn't. So that to me is zero trust. And when you build the rules and you build the regulations that you use to look at your cloud, you have to think like that. Everybody inside and outside can be a threat, and or is probably one. Um, which is a great lead-in to KIM, or entitlement management. Um, Everybody that is operating in a cloud, that you've given access to the cloud to either do a task, or do administration or maintenance or whatever, is going to have roles. Some of the objects in the cloud are going to have roles as well. There's going to be roles that a machine can access in order to be able to do a write or a read from a storage device. There are roles and policies that a user is going to have that will allow them to maybe create other user accounts. Um, whether it's new services are coming on the cloud that need to be secure, whether it's new roles that need to be defined and categorized, whether it is trying to find out what the actual effective rights are for a user or a system that has multiple roles or multiple policies associated with them, and then you don't know, wait a minute, this thing has 3 policies associated with it. Does any one of those give the system access to this? Um, who's assuming roles? When are they assuming those roles? Have they always assumed the roles the same way, or are they now assuming roles that they shouldn't? Is somebody escalating privileges? Is somebody behaving the way that they shouldn't be? Did somebody misconfigure my policies or my roles? KIM, or entitled management, is basically what this is matching everybody's activities or every object's activity or every user or role to the access rights that they have, and in every single case take rights away from people that shouldn't be having those access rights in order to reduce attack surface. Um, so you always need to know who's using your credentials, who's using your roles, who's taking advantage of the policies, who's escalating those privileges. And once you go into the cloud, because identity management is so built into the fabric of cloud, there's no way that you can do this as a person. You need to some sort of a system that is continuously monitoring behavior of objects and people and users and API calls, and is telling you, whoa, this particular system has been doing backups for 6 months, and all of a sudden started SSHing out to the internet, right? Or user X all of a sudden escalated their privileges when their job and responsibilities have not changed. All these things are things that you need to be aware of. There are things that need to look at multiple factors to make sure that, is this an issue or is it not? Well, this person can do this and he can create or delete groups, but he is right now in San Francisco and somebody's logging from China to do this, or Asia. Or a user that has never done something all of a sudden got the privileges to do something that has no relation to anything in his group or category. All these things have to be monitored, and that's part of your a KIM module or identity systems. And again, a ton of solutions to this today, but it's something that you need to think of when you are deploying in cloud, because this has to be secure as well.
So,
yes.
Question on that.
Sure.
And I work best on silly examples. So
Sure.
I'm an admin for the cloud, go and set up web apps and get things deployed, and take code and get it deployed into the cloud so it's an app serving customers. That's my day job. And I decide, or I win the lottery and I decide I don't like my boss very much. And when they terminate my access to the company, it's going to break a whole bunch of stuff. And I go and change the service account from the service account that's there to my account. So that when they disable me, when I leave the company, it also disables all of their applications at the same time. This is sort of built to catch that, right?
It is actually, that is a great example, because it's looking for those interrelations or interdependencies, and it does it as a matter of rule, because it knows that something like those things do happen. and not everybody always thinks about those things. So yes, that is a wonderful example. Um, when you are using policies and roles in cloud, you are actually using building blocks, and you are correct. Some people use the same building block in a bunch of places, or they tie a particular building block to something else, and that relationship is not always evident until something goes in and looks and says like, "Whoa, this person, this janitor actually has access codes to a bunch of applications for some reason." So yes, this is exactly what this is built
Which
for.
janitor service accounts do you have that have access to all of the systems?
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. So, comparing accesses for each role and each user, or API credentials to like systems or other comparable things, or baselining what they do and saying, well, you have the access right to go into this storage, but I have not seen you go into that storage for 6 months. Why do you even have access to do that? That is what this is made to do, and it has the capability again of looking at all these things continuously over long periods of time, so it can actually discern those patterns.
Yeah, as a human, it's nearly impossible to have all the information that you need to be able to
It's just too
know.
much. Yes, exactly. Yes.
Did this janitor get a promotion? And man, now they are a developer. Who knows?
Yep.
Because the organizational maturity is not there, and you have to rely on something else to tell you all this information.
That's 100% true.
CNC operator go to developer. Had one of my classes.
Right. I mean,
Went back to school, graduated, took a chance on it, moved to developer, did great. So,
yeah,
it's something that happens.
Nothing against the janitor. I'm just saying, like, if the organizational maturity is not there
To let you know that, yeah.
to like,
right.
hey, sysadmin, we just promoted this person. They should have
Yep.
this role now.
Exactly. Yes. Something should be looking for that stuff.
The only way I knew you moved to a developer is because I was in IT. And I was like, hey, I used to see you on the floor all the time. Now you're sitting in here with us.
Right.
We didn't get an alert from HR or anything, so
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah, that's where I think this gets difficult is
Yeah.
when you don't have that, information that, HR is like, hey, by the way, this person, is now doing this. That role-based access kind of should,
we've
provide
done
a
this
lot
for
of
shitty companies in the past, but I've never had HR reach out to us as IT, the people that control access and say, hey, this person's job.
Yeah, that's-
It's usually the person's new manager that says, hey, they need access to this now.
Right.
But they don't necessarily say, hey, they don't need access to this other stuff they had access to either, so.
Yeah, it's very ad hoc and it's only net new. We're never gonna kill off the old access.
By the way, quick time check. I've been going for about 20 minutes, right? Or more or less?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. When you find something, or when the system finds something that is out of whack, whether it's with roles, whether it's with misconfigurations of objects, having some sort of an automated orchestration remedy system is highly recommended, because again, it's almost a rule that somebody's going to flag a vulnerability and say, well, I'll get to it, and it may take me a week to get to everything, right? But if you have as much automation as possible, then you don't even have to fix the issue, but you can reduce your liability, your vulnerability, by just changing something using that automation that is going to keep you secure until you do get to a place where you can fix it. Okay. All these systems that look for all this stuff, look at the objects, look for misconfigurations, look for vulnerabilities, they're going to be using normally one of these three techniques to do it. There's something called site scanning. There's, of course, the ability of putting an agent inside of the system, and there is an API query to the provider, which is kind of like going to your phone provider and say like, okay, I want a record of every call that this phone made, and how much each one of those calls it lasted. So that metadata is something very, very rich that you can get from the providers. And a lot of systems use that. Other systems do site scanning, and site scanning works basically in the cloud. Is very easy to make a copy of anything. So you can make a copy of a VM, you can make a copy of an object, and then while the original object is doing its thing, you can deep inspect or you can look into that copy that you did, and you can look for things on it. Site scanning is not as um, in uh, comprehensive as having something inside of the system that is actually running on the live system and seeing the processes. This is more of like looking inside of a parked car, but it is very valuable because you don't have to put an agent necessarily inside of something. Having an agent instead of something, it's like having a TSA federal agent instead of an airplane. If everything else failed and something is happening inside of the airplane, you have somebody in there with a gun that can take care of it, right? And the phone records are not going to do anything, and looking into the windows is not going to do anything. So all these things have their value. These are all the ways where your posture management system spies on your network or gets information about the network. And in my opinion, you should be able to do all three. You should be able to choose which one you want to use for any particular environment or any particular task, but you should be able to gather information using all of these particular ways. Um, of course, the system has to be able to find you and report things to you. So integration with things like Splunk, Teams, Jira, ServiceNow, you name it. It's Slack. The cloud command centers is pretty much mandatory, and it's even better if you have the capability to create an API and tell it what to send to things that are not even part of the integration. Because hey, I happen to know what the API command is to notify this particular application. So I'm going to tell my system, this is how I want you to notify me by sending this API into this system and letting me know about it. So the capability of letting you know what the heck's going on in a way that makes sense and you prefer is awesome. Looking at brand new technologies. This is I put in iPhones and WhatsApp because the FBI, on more than one occasion, has had to hire somebody to break into an iPhone. The drug dealers are using encrypted end-to-end applications like Signal, like WhatsApp, right? And you need to be able to see inside of those things. And the most common problem that I see people running into in cloud is that microservices and serverless are really, really popular. And there is literally no way you can put a firewall in front of a serverless function. The Lambda functions or Azure functions or GCP functions, they run on any host that happens to have any free time anywhere on the provider network. So you need some way to protect this that is not your traditional ways. So these things have to be part of whatever system is looking at the cloud because these are tools that you're using in the cloud. So making sure that you can look at things like functions and that you can do monitor what is it, what tasks they're running, what are they connecting to, whether they have any built-in malware on them, whether they have way too many access rights to what they're supposed to be doing, are all things that are important, and they should be some of the things that are covered by your cloud security system. Going inside of the VMs and inside of containers is something else. Again, microservices and containers are more and more popular. I would say only about 40% of our customers are just using straight regular server hosts. Almost everybody else is going into containers and microservices and serverless. We have at least, I myself have 3 customers that are 100% serverless. They don't have a single VM that they're using to run anything. But if you are running things like containers, you have again to have the capability to look at the container layers, look at whether there's any code in there, see whether they're correctly configured, and make sure that the images themselves don't have a malware embedded on them or secrets or keys embedded on them. or they're not calling vulnerable functions or vulnerable APIs. You need to know what the containers are talking. Are they talking to each other? Should they be talking to each other? Making sure you know what is talking to what, even if it's just a node or a worker inside of a host that which is the type of traffic you normally would not see with any sort of inspection system on the outside, because even when you're mirroring everything, like AWS and GCP, give you the capability of mirroring every packet that leaves out of every interface in the cloud. But what if the packets never leave the host, right? You need some visibility inside of those systems, inside of those um, containers, basically. Um, when you're configuring containers or creating containers or changing containers or give them new instructions or updating things, you're using APIs. um, by default, those APIs just need authentication. um, Maybe you need some sort of control saying, okay, if somebody is doing changes to my containers, they should only be using a specific set of registries. They should be labeling things in a particular way. They should never be doing this or that. So you want to be able to enforce things inside of hosts and inside of containers that are running instead of hosts. That is the degree of control that you need to keep the cloud safe. Same thing. When you're running these applications, you need to process the actual executables, the processes that are running inside of these systems to make sure that nothing is running that should not be running. Only items that you whitelisted if you're doing specific whitelists. Something that is conforming a day-to-day behavior, if that's the way that you want to do it. So it should be able to learn what a container application normally does, but it should also allow you to say, in no case should this system ever run SSHD or any sort of process that you believe may be dangerous. And this include also not only processes but also connections. And since we're talking about connections, we're talking about logs, and this means recording everything that is talking to something else, and recording every single activity. The cloud providers put or generate flow logs and activity logs when do this, but those are very basic. So this is what an AWS log looks like. You can see some IPs. You can see what it was accepted. You can see the time of day, maybe an interface, but it doesn't tell you what is what. Is this IP in the US or is it in China? Is it malicious or not? Is this that it's talking to a load balancer? Is it a Lambda function? If your posture management system, your inventory management system collects information about the cloud, it already has a lot of this information. And when you correlate it, you can do things like I can show you what is talking to your systems from outside of the cloud, what those systems that have that IP were at that particular day and time when this happened. Was that system malicious or not? What was the actual timeline? So the capability of enriching the logs and looking at them in order to look for maybe MITRE style attacks, behavioral violations, malicious systems that may be talking to you, whether you're applying to whatever the malicious traffic is or not. Having the capability of visualizing that enriched set of data gives you a very quick idea of what's happening. You can look at lines and lines of ASCII, but it makes a lot more sense to see something very visually labeled that tells you this is talking to this and it shouldn't be. So not only are you looking at the communications and seeing the direction of the communications, again, whether the system is malicious, whether it's from China or Brazil, what class of maliciousness it has, what exact system it's talking to, and the direction of the flow is just in this direction, or is there a reply? Those are the things that you can very quickly see by monitoring communications and analyzing it and having the system alert you, hey, this happened 10 minutes ago, or this happened 15 minutes ago. and maybe even run something automated to block a particular IP or quarantine a particular system. Same thing with activities. So it's awesome that you can do this with the flow logs, with this system is talking to this system, but you also need to know what people are doing, what APIs are doing, what objects that are assuming roles are doing, and monitoring that and giving you alerts whenever that behavior is way out of whack. Somebody started deleting S3 buckets. That somebody happens to be using root privilege. This is when this was happening. You can specify the particular user agent. If you try to see this on a log, it's going to look something like this. But when you see this, you can very quickly know and understand what's going on and see the relationship between the users and the targets that user is connecting to, and the commands that user is using against those targets. Finally, censorship. Read everything that is written. This has to do with code scanning. We talked about microservices, about applications running on containers, about Lambda functions. This is all code. And almost everything that runs in the cloud is controlled by code or is an application that was coded. And the sooner you look at this code, the sooner you can find something that may be wrong with it. Whether it's scanning infrastructure as code, which is what you're using to deploy systems or delete systems, looking for tampering, looking for secrets or things that are exposed that shouldn't be leaking or visible. Being a source of control on the CI/CD pipeline. These are all things that should be part of your security. And doing them before this code ever gets to the cloud is the perfect time to do it. And a code that is easy to use, an inspection. If you're coding a program and scanning the code takes you 45 minutes, you're never going to do it. If you can code for 3 hours and then run something that is going to take 30 seconds to let you, hey, you left an embedded key, or this, there's a particular token that is exposed, or there's a particular piece of malware in here, it suddenly becomes a very useful tool in your arsenal. Last slide, risk analysis. A system like this that's monitoring all the things that I talked about is going to produce a lot of events. We are going to be, and by we I mean any vendor, is going to be very, very careful in telling you which events are critical, which ones are informational, which ones are severe, high, medium. We're going to classify, CVE vulnerabilities, and still, you're going to see that even if you have 38 critical events in an hour, you're still wanting to know, okay, which one do I need to attack first? Which one is the one that I take care of first? That is what a risk analysis tool will do for you. If a CSPM system or a KIM or a workload protection system has some sort of a risk evaluator that says, out of these 35 critical systems, these 3 are the ones that you need to look at first because they happen to be in production accounts, or they happen to be in your most important application, or the application that has the most capability to do harm inside of your cloud. It quickly lets you zero in on where is it that you need to begin addressing whatever is wrong. Even if you have automation that may reduce the amount of risk, maybe the risk analysis tells you, these things are important, but we already ran this automation that quarantined them. So the level of risk that these specific misconfigurations represent is no longer a top priority. All those are the things that you need to know. And this is one more tool that should be part of your arsenal. And I believe that is it for me. I will go ahead and upload a copy of the slides. Any questions? And you guys have been great asking as we go along. So everything might be covered, but yeah.
Yeah, I got a
Mhm.
question or like a line of logic to go.
Mhm.
Actually, could you throw up your slides again?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Because you walked through, well, I guess CloudGuard, right, which is
Uh-huh.
Checkpoint's platform and the UI and whatnot. But you talked about a lot of like asset management inventory and the risk
Yep.
analysis template, or I guess the dashboard, and then the rules
Mhm.
for I guess detecting like threat behavior. How much of this is like templatized or like comes out of templates where you can change the set point, or is this I have to get a solution architect to like arrange and set all this up? Like if I'm,
That is,
if I'm a hospital
yes.
and I have to follow HIPAA as like a specific compliance.
Oh yeah.
Like
Yep.
how much of this is like 90% like color copied for HIPAA, and then there's another one for PCI DSS. I'm just curious.
That is an excellent question. And the answer to that is yes. We want to be able to have users um, basically run with this the moment that they turn it on. The moment that they onboard an account, we want to be able to run analysis and show things. We make it very, very easy to use the built-in assessments that are part of the tool, whether it's things like best practices or HIPAA or high trust or GDPR. You can just click on a checkbox and say run this continuously. So yes, a lot of the functionality that you saw is going to be enabled by default in some form. But you're also true in knowing that to take full advantage of this, you need to do a little bit of configuration. You don't have to. We have tons of customers that have not done anything except create users and give them roles to run specific reports or to see specific dashboards. But we also have customers that have written lines and lines of API code and very specific API queries and have customized this tool so that is an essential everyday piece of utility for almost everything that they do. So like it's like a spreadsheet. The more time you take into building a spreadsheet model, the more useful it's going to be over and over again when you exploit the full capabilities that the program is giving you. Right? Again, if all you want to do is do a chart or the sum of 10 cells, that's going to be very, very easy to do. But it usually takes me more than an hour to go through every single module that we have on our system. So I usually like to ask people, well, do you have some preferences? Do you want to start with, security assessments? Do you want to start with identity? You want to start with log analysis? Because there's a lot that is part of that tool. And if you remember, there's 18 different things that you can do to make your cloud more secure, and those can be basic things, or they can be highly customized.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Hey, sure. Any other questions?
So in the risk analysis piece that you
Uh-huh.
have up, to what degree is asset valuation factored into that, and how much? I mean, I would imagine that's a fair bit of work data entry wise in the tool.
Yes.
To be able to tell the difference between an
Yes.
asset that
Uh-huh.
is serving all of my customers, has all of their data in it, versus a tool that only IT uses that only has configuration data in it, say, and
Correct.
the Minecraft server that I'm hosting so that we have something to do on breaks.
Yes, just like the previous question, there is a lot of capability that's built in. So we can make some very good educated guesses without you having to put a single piece of information in here. But at the same time, it gains a lot more value when you do. When you say, these are my production systems, out of these systems, these are the ones that have personal PII information on them. These are the administrative systems. Once you start giving that data to us, the relevance of the risk analysis goes up exponentially. So you are 100% correct.
Yeah.
you can use it straight out of the box, but it gets a lot better when you feed us details.
And I'm guessing that you're inferring what type of system it is based on the usage profile, right? Like I can see
Yep.
people coming in from the outside world and people coming in internally, or I only see admin accounts logging into this particular service, so it must be a admin tool.
Correct. Yes, there's a lot of educated guesses that we can do based on what the object is. How exposed it is to the outside.
Yeah.
All those things. Yes. How much traffic is handling. All those are things that we take into consideration. So yes, but you're correct. The system out of the box has no way of knowing, okay, this is not an operational database, this is in a lab, so the more you tell us about the network, the better job that we can do.
Right.
Is that mapping feature that you had up like self-generating, or is that like an admin generated map?
Which one, the logs or the
Either.
Okay, so
Yeah, that map and then the one before it.
okay, so if we're talking about logs, this is basically visualizations of logs that we ingest. So they come in like this, and we generate something that looks like this,
Okay.
and we look for events, and then notify you those events. So
Is that systemically generated that you're looking at now, or is that something that an analyst built?
This is automatic, basically. Okay, so when we see something that our system tells us, okay, this is a malicious IP talking to a network load balancer, for example, we're going to generate an event. The event is going to generate an alert, and you can click on that event and that alert, and it will show you the logs that are associated with the event, and that's what you can see here. But you don't have to just see an event. I can look at my logs for the last hour, and it will just represent everything that it sees dynamically, straight out of the logs from the last hour. So this capability of drawing what we see on the logs is just dynamically, very quickly building a picture based on the logs that are associated with an event or the logs that are associated with a time period. And then you can save these sort of patterns. For example, if you want, you can have a filter for a particular type of events. So if I ever wanted to see a malicious IP from China attacking my load balancers, I can do a report or a filter for that, and I can continuously go through my logs looking for that very specific attack. But this is again generated via traffic, and we have other maps that are generated via configuration controls. So we see how the security groups, for example, are configured to give access to systems, and we can give you an exact representation of where your true boundary is between your internal systems and the outside. But visualizing that is very, very powerful. And telling you what is external to your cloud, what is internal to your cloud, and what is exposed somewhere in the middle. I don't know if that answered the question. But every graphic, every gauge, every connectivity visualization is built out of the data that we collect and is generated automatically. So you can do, for example, widgets on our dashboard that will take data and put it in a graph, and you tell us exactly what data you want to draw out of, what type of graph you want to show it on. We have some customers that say, can you export this to a charting tool? And we say, yes, almost everything that you see here, we can export for use in some sort of graphing capability, but chances are that we can probably create something in the dashboard that will show you the data the way you want to see it.
So, of all the 20 some odd, kind of topics you covered, is there any kind of prioritization? How do you determine? Can I pick and choose which ones are?
Where do you start?
Yeah, where do I start?
That's a great question. I normally tell people the two places that you want to do first is you want to put some sort of a virtual firewall up in the cloud, and you want to put a posture management system and turn that on. Um, the firewall looks at threats that are coming in packets, either from the inside, laterally, or from the outside. The posture management is looking at configurations and controls. Everything else comes after, whether it's log analysis, whether it's looking inside of containers, looking into serverless, protecting APIs, doing inventories and customizing your assessments. All that is building on those two first blocks. And if the question is, why do I put in first, posture management or packet analysis? Um, it's a toss. We have some customers that use just our CSPM, our posture management, and they don't use any next generation packet analysis. They just use security groups in the cloud. And it's just access control, but it's better than nothing. And we have some customers that are deploying our firewalls in the cloud because that's what they deployed on their data centers, and they want to make sure that everything is visible exactly the same way, but they have not gone into posture management or controlling, the configuration of the infrastructure at all. Um, those two are pretty much near the top, and they should be the very first things that you turn on.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question, and this is not. So this question isn't how much does this cost, but
$1 billion now.
exactly. But
Splunk license, please.
but every action basically you take in the cloud has a cost associated with it.
Yes.
And so, if you cross a zone, you get charged for it.
Yes.
If you log a file or log something, you get charged for it. So how does this play between getting charged with, say AWS or Azure versus adding this enrichment to it and the things that come with that?
That is an excellent question. Usually, our packet inspection is the lowest cost solution that you can add to the cloud. It's because you can start basically very, very small, and you can decide exactly which packet streams to monitor or to inspect. And you can do a lot with very little because you can deploy just a pair of systems and set them up in such a way that they can inspect data that's moving between in and out of your PCI or legal protected area of the cloud, or everything that is going out into the internet. So the entry pricing is not that bad, especially if you start with packet inspection. Posture management, you probably have to reach a certain size before it makes sense. Our smallest posture management bundle starts at 25 assets, billable assets. So which for us is usually VMs that are not micro, but have a certain size, right? And happen to be turned on. So when you have 25 objects in the cloud, maybe it's time to start thinking about posture management. But you don't have to at that particular point. When you hit the 100 assets or the 200 assets, then I would say you should really look into it. But as with everything, again, some customers do just packet inspection, some customers do just posture management. You gotta, it's great if you own a bank and you need cameras and you need motion detectors and you need armed guards. But if you only have an X amount of budget, you have to pick and choose. Same thing with the cloud. You can build a nice set that gives you a lot of security for not a lot of money. But if you turn everything that I've shown you and your cloud is big, the price is going to be, up there.
Microsoft or Amazon is going to be very, very happy.
Amazon and Microsoft Azure and GCP, they all love whenever we talk to customers about things they can deploy, because you're right, it's just more compute costs for them, more expense. Yeah.
because there's the assets that you place into the infrastructure,
Yes.
plus the cost of getting you the logs.
Exactly.
that you wanna
Yes.
have.
A lot of people don't even turn logs on, but if you want to analyze them, you need to turn them on. You need to put them in an S3 bucket or a blob container, and then we need to export them out. And there is an ingestion cost to that. There's a retention cost to that. So yes, turning everything on can quickly add up, but you can pick and choose. And um, a lot of customers are pretty surprised on how reasonable a basic setup can be. So it's not always bad news.
So Gus, correct me if I'm wrong though. Like when we turned on Azure Flow Logs the other day,
Mhm.
and it writes to that storage bucket in Azure, the retention period you can set to 0 though, right? You just need the log to be in the storage bucket long enough for us to take it. You don't have to necessarily store it in Azure as well.
That is an excellent question, because yes, when we're analyzing logs, we have an ingestion cost to those logs, which is basically us just taking the logs and analyzing them, and we have a retention. But you're right, we can create an event with a retention of 0. We can just grab that log, enrich it, look at it, and dump it. Technically, we could. We can create an event when we do that. But if you love the diagram where you saw the objects interconnecting and talking to each other with the malicious IP and the direction of the arrows, we generate that dynamically based on the log information. And if you didn't retain the log, you'll have the event. Malicious IP talking to load balancer. But you won't be able to do the graphical analysis or the investigation at all, where you can then start setting different filters and seeing how the interconnections change and what else that malicious IP has been talking to.
That sounds like hell.
So the longer,
Okay,
yeah.
where? No, I'm not gonna tell you.
But guys, I'm more talking about storing the logs in Azure's storage account. You don't necessarily have to store it there because we're storing it in CloudGuard or whatever
Correct.
solution you're using is probably
Correct.
storing it there.
Yes,
So you don't
but
have
we're
to double-
but we're charging you for that storage. So whether you store it in Azure or in CloudGuard, somebody has to pay for that storage. If you stored it in CloudGuard for at least a month, I think that's a very nice sweet spot, because that means that you have about 30 days to do analysis, visual analysis against those logs after the event has been reported and generated. I myself would love for us to have like a 1 week retention or a 3-day retention rate, which would be a lot lower, because most of the people that don't enable log analysis, they don't do it because of the retention cost. And I think we're already working on that, because again, we don't have to give you the capability forever or even for 30 days. We can create the event and give you a few days to actually look into it and investigate what happened. Yeah, that's really all that's needed. Any other questions?
So if you're only storing, like you said, for a few days so that you could research, you don't have the ability to do any long tail style logging review and things like that, do you?
Well, again, if you're saving the logs to an S3 bucket or a blob, you can, and you don't have to pay us fees for that, but you will have to pay storage fees for to AWS or Azure, right?
Microsoft, Amazon, Google,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
You pay the cloud.
Basically, whether we store it or somebody else stores it, you got to pay for storage.
Exactly. If you want to store them, you have to. If you can send them immediately out into Splunk or QRadar, but then you have to pay for them over there.
Yeah.
And that's the sad thing, right? The important thing is to identify the event as fast as possible, so you don't discover it a year into it and then having to have the logs saved for a year to be able to go back and find out what the hell happened. And I think that that's one of the nice things about doing the log inspection, even with minimum retention. We can see patterns a lot faster than a normal person would take in finding out that this is going on, basically, if that makes sense.
It does.
But I know for a fact that we are reworking our log analysis pricing. So I think we're gonna have an even more competitive price rates for it But to me, the most important thing is activity logs, logs that have to do with actions people have taken in the cloud, creating systems, elevating their privileges, destroying S3 buckets. And we don't charge for any of those. Um, we give you with the regular flat license, we give the capability of ingesting all those logs, analyzing them, and we keep them for a whole month for no extra cost. It's the traffic ones that we charge for. Okay. It has been a lot of fun. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna upload the slides, but somebody needs to give me access. I tried to upload them, and I wasn't able to. So, I will also put my email on the slide deck. So if somebody ever has a question about any of the things that we do on the cloud, I am a cloud architect. That's what I do for a living, answer questions. So feel free at any moment in time to send me a question about any of the items that I've talked about today, if you're interested.
Yes, this has been fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. It's been very good to have you.
Okay, well, have a great rest of the week, everybody.
You too.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.